freedom, yet another freedom. And Goa is also completing 30 years of Goa Statehood Day, which was sort of ultimate freedom for us because we were supposed to be merged into Maharashtra. And then we got liberated in 61, but real liberation was in 67 when the opinion poll, the only referendum was held in the country. And Goa remained separate. Finally, Konkani became the official language after 20 years in 87, and in 1992, based on that, we got the statehood. And that was also a big struggle for freedom for Goans in that sense, in terms of identity. So it's basically two freedoms we are celebrating today with a writer who writes a book, Fractured Freedom, Kobad Gandhi. Kobad is 71 years old, born in 1951, sorry, 47. So you're 73, 75, and studied in Doon School, then St. Javiers College, then in London, chartered accountant, basically, and then he comes to India, and that time there is all over the world, it's a wave of communist movement, leftist movement, leaves everything, joins the movement, and he's been there in the movement for the last 40 years, and out of those 40 years, he has spent 10 years in the jail. And how many jails, Kobad? Six jails, whether it is Andhra, Surat in Gujarat, or in Jharkhand, and most of the time, I believe, in Tihar jail. So, Kobad, I'm not going to ask too many questions, basically 4 questions, but maybe they're lengthy because it depends on how interesting you make it. Because in today's context or in today's language, that way, though all the cases are dismissed against him and he is out. And in Goa today, basically we believe in concept of freedom, and that's why tourists come here. So welcome to the land of freedom. And basically, in these 10 years, jail is one thing, but your book says you met many people. I mean, the different kind of people. You met a terrorist like Afzal Guru, had a very close association with him. Okay, then Chota Rajan, then Brijesh Singh from UP, whom you say in your book is India's topmost don. Then Kishan Pahalwan from Haryana, Fazlur Rahman, Munna Bajrangi, who was involved in that Shilpa Shetty case also. Then Titu Sharma from Jharkhand, whom you call gentleman don in the book. So there are different kinds of dons also in this. And also you meet politicians like Om Prakash Chautala, then Vaidyanath Mahato, who is a brother of Jharkhand Mukti Morcha MLA. Then also you meet a political activist who was Vajpayee's secretary at one time, advisor Sudhendra Kulkarni, maybe for some days in the jail, and also some Maoist leaders. So we met all kind of people. How do you describe them? Who are good, who are bad? Because you had a personal experience, personal interaction with them. For us, the civil society who is outside the jail, they are basically depicted in different ways. This fellow is a don, he's bad. This fellow is a terrorist, he's bad. This fellow is a politician, he's good.
Thank you, Sandesh. First, let me thank Vivek and for inviting basically Roli to present my book at the Festival of Liberty and Light. Actually, the book only particularly deals with that question of liberty, basically, the question of freedom, fractured at all levels, political, economic, social, and at the individual level, which I have tried to deal with more. And since the first question is regarding the jail life, well, good and bad is a relative question. When I portrayed the dons of in the jail in Jharkhand, whether gentleman don or not so gentlemanly, the question was more in relation to the politicians, who are probably the bigger dons, I feel, of our society. These were more like Robin Hood type of images they had. They, of course, they also became feudal terrors once they gained their power. But they were very much part of the feudal. It started with as I say in my book also, it started with a revolt against some feudal oppression, some feudal actions, and they themselves become de facto landlords afterwards and very powerful. Like Brijesh Singh have thousands of crores at his service. So it's relative in society, good and bad, and we see this all over basically. So I wouldn't like. You can read more details in the book.
But what is not there in the book, I'll ask you. Like, you write very highly about Afzal Guru.
Yeah.
What
See,
kind of
Afzal
person?
Guru was different. He was the main attraction. In fact, in all the interviews, in fact, that took place after the book was released. Basically, he was a very decent person. He was intellectual. He was knowledgeable. He was not a fundamentalist. He was opposed to fundamentalism, like I think most Kashmiris are. They basically want their freedom from both Pakistan, at least he wanted it from both Pakistan and India. And he would picture Kashmir like just an open prison. Every step you move, there's a police or army and things like that. And he was a very, he was a very decent person, Afzal Guru, and I don't know why they made him a scapegoat, because he was in no way a fundamentalist, and they knew it also, the Congress government.
I mean, you used to have a lot of discussions. You could have a lot of discussions.
Every day we would meet for tea and things like that, and we had a lot of discussions.
I mean, intellectually also
he was interested. He's read Noam Chomsky. He's read all this. But most of these Islamists I met, others you can't talk to them for more than 5 minutes. There were other Islamists in the jail, the Mujahideens and all that, but you really couldn't converse with them for more than 5 minutes because they just try and.
He was not a fanatic in that.
No, the others were. They would try and convert you to Islam, that's all. The purpose of their conversation was that, but he was different, quite a different person. And he was very humanistic and decent.
I mean, any anecdote which you remember? Like
anecdote, I can't remember any, but basically we would every day meet for tea. And he had a method of making hot water into tea. The jail gave virtually hot water. And a good cup of tea we would have.
How did he face his hanging?
And he introduced me to Sufism, Rumi.
Oh.
He was actually a Sufi.
Yeah, you written that in the book.
And it was interesting because I knew nothing about Islam or Sufism. And he basically introduced me to those concepts.
How did he face his hanging?
Hanging, it took place in front of us. Didn't expect it. It was suddenly they shut the whole jail and they gave some other stories about it. But we were in our high-risk ward. It was attached to the Fasi Koti, and people saw work going on at the Fasi Koti. So there was some doubt that maybe there'll be a hanging, but there hadn't been a hanging in Tihar since '89. So people were not sure. But suddenly that was the whole jail was shut up, and then his cell was the first cell. It was open. He went out like normal, thinking the other cells will be open. But they locked his cell and locked the whole jail. And within 2 hours he was...
Because I heard one of your, I think it is Karan Thapar's interview with you, that you said that the whole staff was weeping when he was...
Yeah, he was very
why
liked
so?
by the staff also.
Why?
He was very much liked. He was very decent with everyone and lived very simply in jail, not like the dons and all that which threw around their money. He didn't have. His wife earned as a teacher, and she would send about 1,000 rupees to the jail for his expenses. And he lived very simply, and he was very warm with everyone. He had no vindictive attitude. Though he was originally, I believe, treated very badly in the jail, but not afterwards.
Maybe, okay, as a human being, he was very nice, but did you find him to be anti-national?
No, he was for Kashmir. If that's treated as anti-national, then that's anti-national. He was for the freedom of Kashmir. He says we don't want to live I think if the government removed all the terror and the police and the army and all that, I think they could adjust also.
From Afzal Guru to Chota Rajan?
Chota Rajan I was not in touch with. Brijesh Singh I was more in touch with.
How was it?
They were really big time mafia.
Because you are saying Brijesh Singh is India's topmost
Yeah,
don.
they say. That's other people mentioned.
What was your experience with him?
He was with me very decent, but he probably needed also this thing, protection. But he was basically his father. Basically, the functioning I've noticed in the UP and Bihar and that heartlands, these people were killed. His father was killed by a landlord. He went to built a gang to take the revenge.
He is the one whose father was with Charan Singh.
All of them, basically the same story you find. And in the course of taking revenge, they built their own gangs and they became dons of some high caliber, some lower caliber.
So it was basically these dons were created due to this high class or the landlord class or the ruling class and the downtrodden people and those struggles.
Middle class.
Maybe farming class.
Yeah.
Through that these struggles came up and through that these dons are created?
No struggle. It's basically revenge killing, that's all.
Okay. And how was Chota Rajan treated in the...
I don't know. He was in a separate ward and he was a Sarkari don. So he was given special treatment.
Meaning?
I mean, he was given special treatment and all that. The whole ward was cleared for him and things like that. So that whole jail, the whole high-risk ward was cleared only for his benefit. I think he feared being killed by his rival.
Daud.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about Om Prakash Chautala? He was a big politician.
I didn't really interact with him. He was there while we were in second jail. Actually, the thing is that after the first 3 years inside Tihar, they had the system of transferring people every 2 months, 3 months from one jail to another. Real harassment. Whether you were punished or not punished, they would transfer. Then I went on hunger strike when I was there to stop that. Then they stopped it. The DG then stopped it for me. It was a real harassment because I was doing a lot of writing in jail. All my articles came. In fact, the roots of this book that I've written was based on 5 articles written in 2012, Freedom and People's Emancipation. Those articles...
In the mainstream.
Came in mainstream. 6 articles came in mainstream. Actually, the essence of the philosophy of that was presented in those articles came. But after that, with this transfer, you couldn't write. You couldn't concentrate. And it probably consciously done also.
But there were also some Maoists who were arrested, but on the charges of some extortion and all, and you were with them.
That was in Jharkhand jail. I said Titu Sharma was there and there were some Maoists and things like that. But that's not the essence of the book. The essence of the book is on by concept of 4 years working, which I think is one of your questions.
Yeah, that definitely we are going to take.
So, I mean, those were there. I mean, Jharkhand jail was, I've never been to Jharkhand before. In Jharkhand jail, there were a lot of these people, the more lower ranking activists. And they were part of the system, basically, the jail system, that's all.
One line which you just mentioned, one line in the book, and that's why I'm a little curious to know about it while writing about your dons and others in that chapter, is not surprisingly, over 50% of jail inmates are dowry death and women-related cases.
So that's in Jharkhand. In Jharkhand jail, it's very feudal and it's very, this thing, I don't know, I have not really done a sociological analysis of the man-woman relations or the type of nature, but I found that a lot of the people in Jharkhand jail, nowhere else, on the so-called dowry or women-related cases. Maybe it requires some sort of analysis of Jharkhand society, but that was the character of Jharkhand jail, nowhere else.
Nowhere else.
Yeah.
Okay, coming back to your movement, the communist movement which you were involved in, and I believe when you were released in 2019, and then you wrote the book Fractured Freedom, and then you were expelled from the party. Why was so?
That you asked them. I don't know.
I mean, what was...
I don't know. There's nothing critical out here. It's basically an analysis of the communist movement. I am a communist still. Like Sujata also says, I believe that socialism is the only economic system that is viable for the oppressed masses. Dialectical materialism is the only really scientific ideology to give an approach. Now, how one interprets it depends on what I've written in the last section is based on also my experiences. It's also been a conceptual analysis of why Soviet Union, China, and all the other socialist countries have gone backwards. So basically it's that when I talk about questions of freedom, values, and happiness, it's linked to the reasons what I have derived from my experience and what I conceptualize of why with power you tend to become corrupt and tend to become oppressive, and that's what happened in Soviet Union.
We'll definitely discuss that. Definitely, that is the main question we are going to discuss. But your own comrades who were with you, okay, so you know them quite well. So you must be knowing what exactly must have upset them because of this book.
No, I
that ideology which you countered of your own comrades.
The question is there have been hundreds of critiques, and they've basically criticized these concepts of freedom and happiness. So
that's what basically the question is.
Communists talk about dictatorship of the proletariat.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why it's some sort of mechanical interpretation.
So do you still believe in dictatorship of proletariat?
See, the question is, it's a relative. Dictatorship never negated freedom also. Everything is relative, freedom and dictatorship. The question is that I believe that...
Yeah.
Yeah, I think...
No. You please explain this, yeah.
See, the question is that what I'm saying is that firstly, we need a new set of values. The new set of values comes with a new society, building a new society, which I've called the Anuradha model. You can see what it is, naturalness, simplicity, all those questions of that. Now, that does not come normally, naturally in society. Though we might be ideologically attracted to Marxism or the new socialism, but we have to change ourselves. And I found in our systems that we existed, we were not able to change. So it requires, what I say is an atmosphere of freedom with a goal of happiness. If you have a goal of happiness, you won't oppress your cadres. You won't dominate them. You won't be autocratic. So that aspect should be there. And the question of freedom is the question that means you should be able to be critical of whether it's a leader, whether it's a normal person, whether it's oneself. That type of freedom, not laissez-faire type of functioning, but basically, and when I say the Anuradha model, Anuradha happened to be my late wife. She was highly disciplined. It's not that she was not disciplined. Some people are putting that freedom means laissez-faireness and you do what you are, anarchism and things like that. It's not that. It's a question of the right to be able to be critical of whoever it is out there who we see as doing wrong. But in the actual functioning, so-called democratic centralism, there's no democracy as such. It's basically autocratic functioning.
It's centralism more and more.
Yeah, it's more centralism, and it's so you have to change internally. And what I try to analyze here is the psychology of it, because basically our emotions and our thinking are, according to psychology, is built in the first 7-8 years of our life. And our whole mind is basically, our subconscious mind, that they say, still remains in the old frame and not in the new frame. So we have to continuously change ourselves, and India is particularly bad because of the Brahminical outlook. This Brahminical outlook is so pernicious, and manifests so subtly also in communists, in everyone basically, particularly higher caste, but everyone. It affects the whole society. So is this Brahminical outlook in India, unless you take this even more seriously in the Indian context, because of this Brahminical type of approach that is there. And communists have not addressed this Brahminical approach, the non-Brahmin movement. I feel that in India we need to Indianize Marxism. We have such a strong tradition of a non-Brahmin movement, and that is a democratic tradition, right from the Lokayas to the Bhakti movement to Buddhism to so many, 3,000 years of people's history in a non-Brahmin movement. I'm hearing also in Goa it's very strong, this non-Brahmin movement, the Bojan movement out here. So we have to adopt all that, and that is at one level, at the structural level. At the ideal thinking level, it is manifests so subtly in so many ways of hierarchical domination in our committees, in our approaches, in so many ways. It completely negates the humanistic aspects of Marxism, which Marx talked about and all the Marxist philosophers talked about. It completely negates it. So basically, it's trying to apply it to the Indian context of where Brahmanism sort of dominates every aspect and which is used by every single ruling class, Islamic, British, or anyone else besides the Hindus lot. So that is the basic essence of this book, which I intend to develop even further in my analysis, by further studies and further analysis. And after coming out of jail and talking to people from various groups, I feel it's even more dominant in every group, not just our circles.
Before I take, throws it up to the audience, the last question. Is Naxalism a failure, outdated? What is it?
The thing is, Naxalism is just a trend of in the communist movement. The whole Marxist movement has had a setback. China, Russia, everywhere, there are no left movement, but the oppression is even at a higher level than ever before. If you see the billionaires during the lockdown, the billionaires have made more money and the poor and the middle classes even have been pushed into poverty. So there's a need for an alternative. I see nothing except socialism as an alternative. There's no, capitalism has two forms of systems, the Keynesian model and the neoliberal model. Both have failed.
No, I'm asking you only from one point of view, that basically the Naxalite movement or the ML movement never believe in India's parliamentary system. Do you still believe in it?
See, I'm not talking about politics at all in this book. I'm talking at the philosophical level. You may
no, I'm asking you at political level.
I'm not going to answer that question because I'm not dealing with it at that level.
Okay.
That is for activists to decide what tactics they adopt, what they don't do. I'm no longer that. I'm giving my experience at the philosophical plane and how there's need for basic change in approach. That is what I'm saying. These are all tactical questions. They can change, be one thing today, they can be another thing tomorrow.
Because you also talk about Swadeshi.
Yeah, that's economics. I believe that until this drain of the country, the drain of wealth from our country stops, like even earlier the freedom struggle people talked, India can never develop. And probably the drain today, I'm an economist basically, but the drain today is probably more than it was during British time. All these tax havens, all the illicit money that is going abroad. This has to stop, but that's at the economic level I haven't dealt with here. I'll deal with it in a separate book,
Okay.
I believe.
Vivek, questions please.
Thank you so much for that. That's really bracing and brilliant. The great Lou Majau has been admiring what you were saying and the clarity. Any questions from the audience? We have time for two. It's a rare opportunity to ask a question to this gentleman. 1 minute. Just two questions. Okay?
Yeah, I'm Jatin Naik. I'm a trade unionist. So I'm a General Secretary of CITU. Comrade, I want to ask you, you have come in this movement, communist movement, by liking the idea of Marx. And I feel, and including all the communists, they are obsessed with Marx. And you are obsessed with Communist Manifesto, basically. When Communist Manifesto is discarded by Marx and Engels, what do you say on this? And second question is, Justice Rohinton Mehta, Rohinton Nariman, has given book to you through his father, Fali Nariman, that Fire Within, that is based on your Zoroastrian philosophy. So how this contradict communist philosophy and Zoroastrian philosophy?
You want me to answer that? This, as far as the first question goes, I believe that dialectical materialism is the most scientific philosophy compared to anything as a philosophical. I'm not going into the content of the books written in 1848 or then. So basically that. We have to interpret it according to our situation, according to the conditions, according to the new knowledge that we have gained. Marx's, then after that there were two revolutions, after that 3 revolutions, Paris Commune, Soviet, China. There's so much more knowledge we've gained. So basically, I don't think we should stick to any dogma, whether it is this, that's the problem in India. We tend to stick to a lot of dogmas. It has to be creatively applied, particularly, as I said, to this non-Brahmin traditions, taking the non-Brahmin traditions forward in the Indian context. Regarding the thing about, I think we should also take whatever is positive from any writing, whether it's the Renaissance in Europe, the writings then, or whether it's Zoroaster that I've quoted some of his quotes. It doesn't mean that I'm not a dialectical materialist, but I think that one should learn from it. We take from Ambedkar also, for example, Ambedkar's writings on the caste issue, but we don't stick to only Ambedkar, we go ahead. Anand Chattopadhyay has written things beyond Ambedkar also, taking the caste question. So we should take whatever is positive, what we feel is positive in society, and take that forward. But for the changing society, basically.
Thank you so much for that. Any other questions? We can definitely take another. No? I'd like to ask a question. When I was growing up, I heard this slur a lot, particularly from in the United States, limousine liberal, this limousine liberal idea. And of course, it is a question which if one looks at the contours of your own biography, Kobad, this comes to mind. I mean, liberal, of course, is perhaps as bad a word in your vocabulary as limousine. But I'm asking the question, what is it, you come from a life, a family setting of some privilege, and you have dedicated a considerable portion of your life to questions of equality, kind of dismantling that privilege. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what are the lessons to be learned now in this highly unequal world of the 1% versus the 99%, maybe the 0.001% against the rest? What are your thoughts in the broader sphere about where we find ourselves today, and what can we do in this peaceable middle class bourgeois kind of a setting? What is the relevance? What is the spark that can be lit for liberty and light in this context? Please.
See, there are two aspects to this. I feel that one is that we should have our heart in the right place. That is, with the oppressed people, we should first, the starting point should be that. We should have our heart in the right place, that with the oppressed, and we should not, at least internally, if we can't do anything, we should not, in our psychology, tolerate any form of oppression, whether it's caste, whether it's economic, whatever it is. We may or may not, some person may dedicate his whole life. I mean, Anu and I lived amongst the Dalits in the slums and all that type of stuff. I'm not saying everyone can do that, but to whatever level one can stay with justice, on the side of justice. I think it's these small drops that fill the ocean for change. Of course, there has to be a leadership. There has to be people with more dedicated force and ideology and things like that. But this liberal or democratic movement that is there, if it spreads in the country in a large way, it can add to the change. And I think in that way, everyone can contribute. What you're saying, the middle class, that's why I'm saying that not everyone may take the steps we took. We were idealistic also. In those days, there was Russia, half the world was nearly socialist. The Chinese revolution had taken place, the Cultural Revolution had taken place. There was a lot of idealism. Today, there's nothing in this neoliberal environment. Of course, people may be disgusted by what exists, and certainly this extreme impoverization and extreme billionaire culture that is there both in India and internationally is something that is totally intolerable. But everyone, can contribute in their small way, even if they don't have to give their entire lives for working amongst the oppressed. And I think that it is these drops that will help create the basis and ocean for change, basically.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kobad Gandhi, Sandesh Prabhu Desai, for a very interesting conversation. It's very much tied to what we've been hearing about Francisco Luis Gomes in the last few days. Mr. Gandhi, I myself have been reading Francisco Luis Gomes again and again, sometimes quite desperately, looking for reasons. And he's a very inspired man, and he made
for his time, he wrote that book on the Brahmins was really in 1886.
But actually,
incredible.
Actually,
it's really incredible.
The texts that are really important are his economic texts, where he talks about where he analyzes. He is the head of Ranade. He comes directly from him is Ambedkar, actually. Also, his statements on behalf of freedom, delivered in the nicest possible way, in the heart of the slavers' empire, in the heart of the colonial empire. He demanded equality, liberty, and light. And in reading him again and again, you know, I've been thinking about, I was actually privileged, it's a very strange story, but I went to school with the children of Malcolm X, believe it or not.
I see.
Okay? Yes, Katore Baji. But so I've been thinking about Malcolm X a lot. Malcolm X was very tied to the Goan revolutionary in East Africa, Pio Gama Pinto, and Malcolm X and Pio Gama Pinto had a long meeting and a period of time together in Nairobi, following which both of them were assassinated quite soon afterwards. It's a very interesting story. But in thinking about Malcolm X, I realized who I am, and I see this in your book as well. It is a journey in a way to the twinned opposite, who is Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King's most famous line, which is something that I draw inspiration from all the time, is, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it leans towards justice." Mr. Kobat Gandhi, Mr. Sandesh Prabhudesai, thank you all for being here.